I think writing a book of poetry is interesting because you are putting together a collection of lots of times in your life, or times and spaces where you had, I guess quite an economical way of creatively expressing that time and thought. And so as a collection, I think I really needed to think about how it was going to come together, because it is their poems spanning over, I suppose, the last 5 years or so, and some of them from slightly further in the past as well. So I think my intention was to create a collection that felt true to me and true to what I wanted to say in the world and what I wanted my children to read. I think that in each section of my book, there's a theme, I guess, of moving through the arc of a day, starting with the dawn and birdsong, and moving through sort of, I guess, the hard slog and mundane nature of the sort of middle of the day, and then moving to the sort of, I guess, wonder and awe and reflection of dusk. And I spent quite a bit of time thinking about why I wanted to frame my poems in that way, and I think it's because I noticed that some of my writing can be quite dark and quite difficult, and sort of struggle with the I suppose the challenges, which is what a lot of poets I think probably do in their sort of sense making nature of writing. And so I wanted the collection to feel like it had some sort of I suppose grit and resolution in that as well, because I think some of the topics that I speak to are just ones that we're all struggling with. They're human responses, and so I wanted it to feel authentic, and I also wanted it to be relatable. Yeah, I think when it comes to the personal and the universal, I tend to think that, we are mirrors of each. And so I generally navigate my way into any piece of writing, whether it be an art essay or a review on a book or a short story or a novel or a poem. I will always start with a personal place that I connect with that topic. And I often delete that before I put it into somewhere else. But I suppose with a poem, sometimes it can be entirely personal because that's what it's about, and sometimes, like I said, it's about making sense of things, and so I think that I often step into a topic with that, I guess, idea of how it makes me feel, how I can relate to it in my own world, and then often I sort of move further and further out into the world. And sometimes it's the other way around. I'll start way out here and then I'll slowly make my way in and realise that there's some kind of personal piece in that. But I think that that's part of the process for me with writing, is definitely having a sense of understanding of it, because I think unless we really have an understanding, we probably shouldn't be writing to it. So I tend to not write about things that I don't have some sense of connection to, or some sense of, I guess, rightful place in writing about. Yeah. Yeah, I think that e te ao Māori, we whakapapa back to the earth, back to nature. So Tāne Mahuta, for example, is the atua of the forest, and the forest, I guess, in evolution anyway, and within science, the forest was here before humans, and we know very well that the forest can exist perfectly without us. But we can't without it. And so I think I'm always fascinated by that idea of whakapapa. Like in our whakapapa, when I trace it back, on one of our lines, it goes all the way back to rangi and papa. And I think that sense of understanding of that place in the world, and that we're way down the chain of things, and also therefore we're the most easy to knock off the planet because we're not really necessary, is something that I quite often think about when I'm thinking about what it is that we're doing here and what the point of it all is. Yeah. I think writing about the personal and having it exposed is a vulnerable thing, and I feel that I probably manage that by it being poetry. When I was younger, I'd always write poetry, and I think it was actually, like, I hated journaling. I found it so boring. I didn't want to write about the actual thing that was happening. I wanted to write about the beautiful pictures and the deep sort of, I don't know, metaphorical kind of ideas I had around it. And so I realised early on that poetry was the way that I managed to sort of almost build beautiful worlds out of, really difficult things. And so I think that putting personal things through poetry is, even though it is really vulnerable, I think it's still about creating a world. And I think all artists are actually putting a personal element of themselves into their work. It's just sometimes not always as visible. And I suppose with words and the choice to say things that are quite personal, I guess I'm choosing to do that because I think it is important that we, again, name things that are difficult. And I suppose particularly in this collection, there's difficulty in relationships, there's difficulty in being a solo parent, there's difficulty in, living in a world where our planet is struggling, it's difficulty in managing political crises, there's difficulty in COVID, there was a lot of difficulty that I was wrestling with. So I suppose, again, speaking from the personal, I think made it, I guess, feel like I was taking ownership of my own thoughts and feelings around it as well, and I guess offering that to the world in a way that was kind of, this is where I come from, this is who I am, and this is why I feel like I have an ability to speak about this thing, because otherwise, maybe I don't have that permission. Yeah, I thought about this a lot actually. The theme of stars has been one that has been with me since probably my earliest memories of being a child. I have a memory of being we had like a double garage on a piece of land beside Lake Taupo, and I was in a bunk with all of my siblings and going to sleep. I must have been about 4, and as I was falling asleep, I was imagining myself here in Aotearoa, and then imagining the world around that, and then imagining the solar system beyond that, and then the universe beyond that. And I think this was a constant through my life, this sort of sense of the tininess of my existence and the hugeness of what was around us. And again, what were we here for? What was the meaning of this tiny little existence, and what was actually the meaning of everything around us, And so I think probably all of us grapple with that in some way, but I think that the sense of that connection to stars, again, is in a lot of pūrākau Māori, this sense of stars being our guides. They helped us to navigate. They are often seen to be our tipuna again. So this idea that also they might not still exist and we're still looking at them, is fascinating to me. So I think this idea of us sort of sometimes being very caught up in our little lives, I think a line and a concept that I use a lot in my poetry is to look up, and I think that that's probably something that I need to tell myself all the time just to survive. Exactly, and I think that sense of looking back while moving forward is again, a very known concept in Te Ao Māori, and I think that idea of, thinking carefully about where we sit in the world and in time, I think helps us to make good decisions moving forward. Yeah, birds feature a lot in our whakapapa. So koko is another name for ruru, and is also the call of the ruru. And so my great grandmother was called koko, and so my daughter is also called koko. We have a tieke, which is also a bird. We have actually many other manu throughout our whakapapa named there, and I suppose that was sort of part of my questioning and understanding of self, was thinking about those names and what the meaning was, because we don't always have a lot of information about those tipuna. And I think beyond that, I grew up next to native bush, I was, often noticing, I suppose, birds as tohu, as signs in my life. And I write about that throughout a lot of the poems too, as them being these things that arrive in my life at certain times, and often with a very confrontational sort of interaction, not just a nice sort of noticing them in the sky or the forest, but really having them come into my life. And here they're our sort of our icon, aren't they? They're the animals that we have here. They're the things that we, I guess, relate to. And I suppose birds and things like toroa for Kāi Tahu are a really big one too, the albatross, and its sense of, I guess, hope and return. There are lots of ideas around birds and their ability to be a messenger between the physical and the spiritual world. And so I think that the idea of Birdspeak came to me particularly when I was thinking of sometimes when I'm going to speak or write, and I'm really checking in whether or not am I saying that something that's really okay in tika? Am I saying something that's the right thing to say? And so I like this idea that it was almost like ancestors speaking through me, that Birdspeak was like a way to ask for my ancestors to speak through me. So that's where that title name came from. Yeah. The artist is a very good friend of mine, Natalie Couch. She's tuwharetoa, and she is, an incredible artist. She's also moved into working around sustainability and landscape design, and is working with her hapu a lot around regenerating her tūranga waiwai and the whenua at her place, as well as, being an amazing visual artist. She took photographs of me when I was hapu. We lived together up on the west coast of Auckland for a long time. She's the godmother of my son. She's done a lot of the art actually in this room. There's a number of pieces around here that are hers. And so her painting was sitting beside my writing desk, throughout my time of writing this book. And as I was thinking of what I wanted to represent and what I wanted it to be, I realised that her painting of tui up in the clouds, and they're with kite, which I think to me represent the kite of knowledge that were gleaned from the heavens. So there's all of these birds sort of like feeding from this amazing knowledge of the heavens sitting in the sky. And again, that idea of the sort of knowledge coming through felt really pertinent to her painting, and so I asked her if she'd consider me using it as the cover, and she's very graciously allowed us to change the colours to something probably not entirely in her colour palette for the cover. But I'm really, really grateful to have her beautiful mahi, and as part of the book. I'm going to read the poem Birdspeak. Ruru koko, your call a kōauau, your name the only taonga of you I have. Place it gently on my tongue, let me speak as if a bird. Let me speak of you in our reo, as if your memories have wings. Populate my mouth with the notes of your feathered song. Koko, my great taua, were you named for your singing or your lament? We have sadness rife in our lines. Did you call to the depth of the night? Did your sharp eyes hunt the light from the moon? I hear a ruru koko at my window. It has never visited me in this city before. My baby kicks at my lunar belly, both wide awake in the dark. Koko, you call to us. Name the pepe for every pause in our connecting breath. Let it be an ori for her memories. Let it be the sound we speak, as if our mouths were curved beaks to hold the vibrato through all of the strange noises our life is filled with. Your call to us, a kōauau. Yeah, I think that the nature of, again, making sense of life and that sense of, relating to te puna, relating to our place in the world, what our purpose is. I suppose it all brings back to that sense of acknowledging taha wairua, or I guess that spiritual side. I think that I've always grown up with a very strong sense of understanding that existed, and have probably, rolled through different ideologies or philosophies to understand my place in that. And I think, more and more as I work to decolonise myself and reindigenize my thinking, I'm wanting to understand more and more the connection of my ancestors to that side of ourselves. And so I think that often comes back to being in nature and connecting in that way, and I think that that's where I probably most often feel like I am really aware of taha wairua. I think they're just things that I care about, and so I think all of the things that I do in my career have been, largely about how to keep existing in this world, how to keep being in this beautiful place. So I think that a lot of the things that I grapple with in the poems are based around that. So when I'm thinking about social justice and particularly Indigenous rights and reindigenising our world, it is, thinking about, I guess, the sustainability of us as people. And then when I'm talking about climate change issues and I'm talking about the planet, it's the sustainability of our environment. So those things, I think, feel really intertwined. Politics inevitably weave themselves into that because, we are making the decisions around all those things through our political navigation as well. So I think that the poems are both personal and political, and I think that's because that's the existence that we live in. So I suppose Matariki is a time of new beginnings, of new things. It's also a time of reflection, and so we thought it was a good time to launch the collection, being the beautiful reflection, I suppose, of this part of my life, culminating in a new book, so a new thing to offer for the new year. So it felt like the right time to bring it into the world. So I trained as a rongoā practitioner and did a Bachelor of Health Science when I was just straight out of high school, and I was actually at that time thinking I was going to art school, so it was a strange about turn that happened. I think not because it wasn't an interest of mine, but I think because I had up until then been working mostly in the arts through my high school years. All of my subjects were in the arts, so I think that I had a big life event that happened that meant that I ended up not travelling like I thought I was going to, and landing in a degree because I had broken my back and had a big car accident. So I ended up kind of strangely sort of pivoting into this degree, which I probably hadn't planned. And I'm really grateful that I did, because I think it gave me such a huge understanding of myself and the body, and again, my taha Māori te puna, being able to write my research paper on the three biggest issues for Māori, and at that time it was, and probably still is, heart disease, diabetes and asthma. So I was really looking at how rongoā Māori particularly could help to work alongside Western medicine. And I think all along this time I'm writing poetry. It's not like that ever stopped, where I'm writing stories, so I was painting and creating. So I think that the interesting thing, I guess, about doing a degree is sometimes it sort of silos us in one direction. But I think, the lovely thing is that we're all many things, and I suppose as I'm getting older, I'm finding more and more that I can be many things, that I can bring all of myself to the table. And so the rongoā side of things is always present in my life. I lecture at a medical school with fourth year students, and I have done that for years. I run community workshops, I work with whānau and friends. It's still part of my life, and I think that it comes into my writing probably just naturally because that's part of the way that I view the world, rather than it being sort of intentional. I love poetry because it's personal, because it's beautiful. The other forms of writing are interesting to me intellectually, and I think that they're important, and that's why I do them. Writing fiction is something I love to do as well, and I probably just need more time to do that. So I think the beautiful thing about poetry is that it's actually accessible. It's the most accessible art form. I remember reading a beautiful article about this, that it wasn't exclusive, and it wasn't just for the privileged, which I think in some situations, to be able to stop and be an artist, and I'm not saying that artists are privileged actually, but that, to be able to give yourself full time to arts is not something many of us can do. And so I think particularly through a time in my life where I had small children, I realised that I didn't have time to work on an oil painting. It became a need for me to create something, and I could write a poem on the back of a receipt in the kitchen while I was cooking dinner, or I could write it on my phone while I was breastfeeding my baby to sleep. So there were ways in which that I could still let my creative ideas come out, and so I realised that poetry was a very satisfying way to do that, and I could complete something. And I find that, as I said, poetry is something that I lean to or reach for when I'm making sense of things anyway. So it's a natural place for me to unpack and understand. Well, I think that, let's face it, climate change is in the position that it is because of largely colonisation and capitalism. So I think that if we're really working to decolonise and reindigenise, part of that is going back to some of the ways of respecting our environment, which will ultimately mean that we're not using our resources in a way which is unsustainable. I think that a huge part of our sustainability journey needs to be around decolonisation. There's so many. I feel like I've spent so much time with my hidden books. Probably early on when I was a young child, like I remember the beautiful books, of Patricia Grace, like the Spider and the Queer, and the Children of Champion Street and the Tuna, and these beautiful ideas of again, nature and sort of personal life and celebration, and all kind of existing within this one place. And I think they were really fascinating concepts to me. And then as I got older, I suppose I read things like I loved the Bone People when I was a teenager. I think that was a really big inspiration for me around how you could write about terrible pain and difficulty and still make it incredibly beautiful and have hope within it too. And I think that's what Kerry Hume did so well. I think I remember Witi Hamaira, particularly one of his books, it's lesser known, Sky Dancer, which was taking on personas of birds, and it was an incredible book for me because it I guess it played with my imagination and desire to kind of understand birds as I do, and so I really love that book. There are so many poets as well that have inspired me, and particularly I think our contemporary Māori poets that they have been published as well. There's so many I can't even name them. I feel really lucky that we have such a rich writers community here in Aotearoa. I'm inspired internationally as well. There are many writers I love internationally, but I think the kinds of things that I'm grappling with are often, it's beautiful to feel and hear others doing the same in a different way, and realising that we actually all have this beautiful different way of unpacking it. And I think that being able to feed in and read other people's work is such an inspiration for me. I have lots of creative projects I would like to continue on with. I think I'm just really enjoying the beautiful sense of completion of this project, and I think I'd love to explore a short story that I've written that's really too long for a short story, that probably needs to be a novel, but I haven't had time to make it one. So that is something on the cards, I think, in the future when I have time. I also have some paintings I really want to paint. I've got a blank canvas sitting over there that's been waiting for me, and I keep itching to get painting, but I don't have time at the moment either. So I think the thing I want most is time. So if you could slow the sun for me, that would be awesome.
Thank you so much for that. It was fabulous.
Thank you.